Good afternoon, everyone. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this afternoon's webinar. My name is Beck Brayley and I'll be your host for today's event. Today's webinar is brought to you by Leading Sheep. Leading Sheep is an important partnership between the Queensland Department of Agriculture and Fisheries, Australian Wool Innovation, and is supported by AgForce. Our aim is to connect Queensland's sheep and wool producers. Now, before I start, I'll do a quick round of introductions. As I said, my name is Beck Brayley and I work for the Department of Agriculture and Fisheries, focusing on goats. I was a biosecurity inspector for almost 15 years, but I've recently moved across to the extension team, working closely with Leading Sheep, and I'm based in Charleville. Our presenter today is Doug McNaught. He's also from Department of Agriculture and Fisheries, but in Biosecurity Queensland. Doug is a very experienced senior biosecurity inspector and was heavily involved in the introduction of nils tags in cattle almost 20 years ago. In the background, we have Andrea McKenzie. Andrea manages the Leading Sheep project and is based near Cunnamulla, running sheep and goats. In just a moment, we'll be hearing from Doug. So please remember that if you have a question, you can type it in the question box and we'll try our best to answer it during the presentation today.
Thanks, Ben. So yeah, let me introduce myself, Doug McNaught. I'm a biosecurity inspector with 27 years experience. Have been based in central Queensland and southwest Queensland, presently in Rockhampton. Bit of background on myself and eIDs. I worked for a company called Meat Livestock Australia for 4 years, implementing NLIS in cattle Australia-wide. So that was 20 odd years ago. And now today we're going to talk about the eID for sheep and goats. From the survey, I will be covering most of the information there. When I am talking about goats today, I will be differentiating between farmed and harvested rangeland goats. There is a difference, and we'll be covering that down the track. There are some things today that I don't have answers for. I will point them out, and they are a watch this space situation. So if I can get that going. So yes, as I said, we will be covering it. Please, any questions you have, put them in the chat. All questions will be very relevant, and if anybody's got one, someone else will be thinking it. So I'll just get this going. All right, what are we going to cover today? We're going to cover what is sheep and goat eID, why is it being implemented into Queensland, the current situation, and what the implementation for Queensland looks like. And there, as I said earlier, there are a few things still to be finalised, and I'll be pointing them out. So basically, what is sheep and goat eID? It's a national system. It's of eID, electronically identifying all sheep and farmed goats. It's traceability from the individual animal, the property of birth to its last property of residence, through to slaughter. It's through the use of an NLIS approved eID device. In this case, an ear tag. There are no rumen boluses accredited at this point. It is designed for one tag per animal, designed to stay with that animal for its life. Tag retention is something that will come up. I'll be very surprised if it's not a question that is asked, and I will be covering that down the track. Now, the tags are used in conjunction with national vendor declarations, nothing different than what we are already doing. There is going to be something coming out for the harvested rangeland goats, which I will be covering. Now, each sheep or farm goat leaving its property of birth will be tagged with an NLIS approved device, and that device would be a breeder device because it is leaving its property of birth. That survey there before showed a lot of people have cattle as well. It's basically mirroring the cattle situation. So you will see a lot of things that are very similar. So the national eID system, we need three elements for quick tracing and contract tracing. Basically, each location having a PIC number, property identification code. Anybody with livestock and anybody on here will have a property identification code. Use of an ear tag with a microchip in it, as opposed to the visuals we have at the moment, and that microchip identifies that individual animal, and entering the information for each individual animal and the movement from PIC to PIC into the NLIS database. Now I'll just pass over, there's a video here that just explains the process that we have to go through for tracing.
Under the current national system, we track sheep and goats as mobs from property to property using property identification codes, PICs. Let's look at how we currently track our sheep and goats under our mob-based movement system. Meet Woolly. Woolly the sheep lives on River Run Farm with 630 others. Woolly is being moved to Wattle Downs Farm along with 400 other sheep. Wattle Downs Farm houses 1,300 sheep, including a few rams which the owner bought from a breeder. Sometime later, Wattle Downs decides to move a number of their sheep off the property. 60 sheep are sent to the abattoir where 1,400 others have already been delivered. 75 sheep are sent to Shady Tree Farmstead where there are already 575 head on property. 170 sheep are sent to a sale yard to be sold with 6,200 others. 500 sheep from that sale yard are moved to a feedlot, housing 8,000 more sheep. Finally, approximately 1,200 feedlot sheep are moved to an export depot where there are already 21,000 sheep. But wait, where's Woolly? Just through Woolly's potential journey, we've come into contact with about 40,280 sheep. It's at this point we find out that the rams which were brought onto Wattle Downs Farm where Woolly had been living were carrying a disease. Since we don't know where Woolly ended up, or even if she's still at Wattle Downs, we have to trace all movements of all sheep off Wattle Downs Farm through all possible paths that the disease could have flowed through. We also learned that the same breeder which sold the rams to Wattle Downs sold to 26 other properties. We now have to multiply all of these traces by 26. That's 1,047,280 potentially exposed sheep and more than 130 pathways to follow. But let's just look at finding Woolly in this instance. If Woolly had been tagged with an eID tag with a unique electronic number, we would have been able to trace her and the others from Wattle Downs as individual sheep, rather than needing to follow all the potential pathways they could have travelled down and all the other sheep they could have come into contact with. Having individual eID allows us to find Woolly. The time to contain a disease is reliant on the rate of traceability available. As a component of the whole system, eID helps us to trace specific stock and know which others have been in contact with them, improving our rate of detection, containment and response.
All right, now I'll just click on this and get it out of there. What we have found is I have run sheep catching exercises previously, and what happens nationally is Animal Health Australia run tracing exercises to see how well we can trace. We've run 3 cattle tracing exercises and we've run 3 sheep tracing exercises. Those figures of hitting 1 million animals to trace, it's very easy to get to that point, especially when sheep from Queensland go down into the southern states. So what we do find is we can't trace them all. It is too difficult to trace them. We are relying on paper waybills, vendor decks, etc. And if we can't find the paper, we've struggled to do any tracing at all. So that's basically it. They estimate it'll take 15 days if a disease actually gets into Australia. From the livestock, I can tell you that 35,000 head move per day in Queensland. So that's the figures we're looking at. That actual case of the ram sale that actually happened in the cattle industry, and we had 170 properties quarantined within a matter of days. So from a tracing perspective, it is about the cohorts and tracing the cohorts as fast as possible. So the eID does allow us to trace those animals very quickly. So moving on, why is it being implemented? It's a growing need for national traceability system. You'll see that. I've got some maps to show that. It is fast and accurate tracing of animals in the case of a disease outbreak. They believe that there's a 56% chance of a significant disease incursion in the next 5 years. And obviously foot and mouth, which everyone is aware of, they're talking 80 billion over 10 years to recover from that. Now, economic and planning benefits. It's a centralised record of animal movements, the NLIS database. It's going to be the exact same database that the cattle are recorded in. It will increase efficiency and effectiveness of traceability. That is proven. I've done it. I've run it. With the electronic system, it is so much easier to trace animals, and it is so much quicker to trace animals. It is property of origin to point of slaughter traceability. As everybody is aware, Australia is very export market orientated, and our customers are continuing to expect good practice and product assurance. More data to use in business. So this is, if you are going to tag these animals and you are a breeder, using that data, or if you're a backgrounder, etc., using that data to increase your profitability and manage individual animals electronically. And Australia's borders aren't fixed, which my maps will show you. So what have we got? It's proven and tested. Basically, the eID technology, it's what has been in the cattle since 2005 and in Queensland, and sheep and goats since 2017. It's half duplex technology. Questions generally come up from I've run 9 workshops already. Questions come up. What about other technologies? There is a national working group that does look at other technologies, looking at read range, size of device, retention, etc. I'm not privy to any of that information, but I do know that it does do it. At this point, we're using half duplex technology, which is the same as cattle. Learnings from Victoria's eID rollout. They did the same thing with cattle. They went first. They're doing it with sheep and goats. Basically, Queensland is picking the best out of what they've done, not throwing out what doesn't work, learning from their experiences, and what works in different size, sale yards, processors, producers, etc., and trying to make the implementation into Queensland a lot smoother. This safe food evaluation, the traceability exercise in 2020, myself and a gentleman from New South Wales went to Victoria and oversaw this. Basically what it was, Victoria was saying how great RFID or eID traceability was. The other jurisdictions wanted to check whether that information was correct. Myself and the gentleman from New South Wales, we went down there, we went to the meatworks, went to about 6 or 7 meatworks. We stood on the chain, we cut tags out of 8 or 9 sale yard lines of sheep that had visual and electronic tags. We then took them back, put them on a big table and started sifting through them. To work out, we had to correlate that line of sheep back to the vendor deck, back to either the vendor or the properties of residence for the previous 30 days. Basically, we could only find 70% of the visual tags, and that took a number of weeks. The electronic, we had a gentleman there with us. As we flicked him an eID tag, he read it, the software ran the tag, he had the answers while we were at the table sifting through them. The 70% took a number of weeks, and we could only find 70%. So the technology is there, and it does enhance and makes the traceability of the livestock a lot quicker. So how did we get here? September 2022, Australian Agriculture Ministers agreed to mandatory national implementation of sheep and goat eID, commencing the 1st of January 25, which we will go through. A lot of that was due to the situation to the north of Australia with obviously the foot and mouth and lumpy skin, but foot and mouth, which sheep are susceptible to. So once that came about, the sheep and goat traceability task force was formed. This includes state jurisdictions, federal and industry representatives to roll out and to come up with the plan of how this was going to roll out nationally. Now, this is a watch this space. Commonwealth Government has provided $46 million for the implementation of sheep and goat eID Australia-wide. $26 million of that is going to the NLIS database for upgrades, enhancements and improvements. The rest of the funding, the other 20 million, will be split across the state jurisdictions. How that is going to be split, I am unsure at this particular point. If it goes like cattle, it will be on a pro rata basis, depending on the number of sheep and goats in a particular state. The state government has also allocated, I think it's $4.6 million for the implementation within Queensland. I don't sit on that committee, so I cannot give you an answer of any rebates, incentive programs that are going to be available. They are coming. How that is going to look, I'm unsure at this particular point, but we do know that there is $4.6 million allocated by the state government for the implementation of eID sheep and goats into Queensland. So that's a watch this space. There will be something coming. Unfortunately, I don't have the answers today for you. Right, so once it rolled out, the Queensland Traceability Advisory Group was put together. As you can see there, Queensland Government, AgForce sheep and wool and cattle, and then you've got livestock marketers, that's your sale yards, agents, your feedlotters, and your meat industry council, that's your processors, integrity systems, that's the NLIS database. So this committee here comes up with how it's going to work. AgForce are pushing very heavily at the moment for that funding that I was just talking about as a representative of the sheep and goat industry. So they are pushing for that. This committee comes up with how it's going to be rolled out, the time of the rollout and incentive programs available for the industry for the rollout. So current situation, what have we got? Sheep industry, we've got about I think that's 2.3 million sheep in Queensland, only equates to 3% of the national flock. As everyone is aware, 98% of our wool goes overseas and 70% of our sheep meat goes overseas. 95% of our goat meat goes overseas. Current situation, we've got visual NLIS tags, mob-based recording on the database from pick to pick as a mob of sheep or goats or farm goats move. Sheep and the farm goats require a visual tag prior to moving, and obviously you've got the NVD. Quick summary, this is July to December 2022 of sheep movements out of Queensland basically. So what that equates to is 390,000 sheep moved P2P within Queensland in that time frame. About 36,000 were sold through Queensland sale yards. 202,000 went into New South Wales for slaughter. As you can see, a lot of sheep go down into Victoria as well, and the line shooting across Australia, that was a mob of sheep that went to Western Australia. Each one of those lines indicates at least one animal, and as we know, they don't move in ones, so it'd be truckloads. However, in that time, in 2022, 205,000 NLIS approved electronic devices were sold in Queensland. So somewhere in Queensland, give or take a little bit, roughly 10% of the sheep are carrying electronic tags already. Goat movements, once again, July to December 22. That basically equates to about 59,000 moved property to property, 250,000 were consigned to Queensland abattoirs, 54,000 moved from New South Wales up into Queensland, and about 20,000 went from Queensland into other states. This is Warwick sale on a particular day. The day's the 22nd of the 3rd of this year. There was only 1,783 head in that sale. Red is out, blue is in. So that's just an indication of some movements. The surprising thing here was the number of sheep that actually went back out west. So you got to remember the sale yards, the surveys, early surveys showed that a large percentage of, well, a percentage of participants today actually sold into Queensland sale yards. Haven't found that in the 9 workshops I've done. Our sale yard situation with sheep and goats is very small. There are sale yards in the southern states that actually sell more sheep than Queensland has. They have sheep sales of 60, 70, 80,000 sheep a week, and some of those big yards are selling more sheep than we have in Queensland in a year. So it is a small sector in Queensland. And this is goat movements at March 22 to March 23, basically equates to about 450,000 goats going to slaughter, and obviously that's charlable. So the implementation timelines. These are some of the questions that were put up before the workshop. Lambs and farmed kids born after 1st of January 2025 will require a breeder eID device prior to moving from their property of birth. All sheep and farm goats born prior to 2025 require an NLIS visual tag, or they can be tagged with an approved NLIS device prior to movement. So basically, anything born after the 1st of January 2025 gets a breeder electronic tag. Anything that is on the ground now and on the ground up until the beginning of the 1st of January 2025 can move with the visual tag that is in now, or they can be tagged with an eID tag if you wish. That is entirely up to yourselves. From the 1st of January 2027, it's all sheep and farm goats will require a breeder or post-breeder device prior to moving from the pick. Now we will go into breeder and post-breeder, very similar to cattle with the white and orange. And we will go into the colour systems. So that's the implementation. Now the legislative requirements for sheep and goats from the 1st of January. All sheep and farmed goats must be tagged with an NLIS approved device if born after 1st January 2025 prior to moving from their pick of birth. All sheep and farm goats must be tagged after 1 January 2027 prior to moving. The NLIS database must be notified within the 48 hours of completion of the movement, exactly the same as cattle. And once again, the receiver is responsible for completing the transfer on the NLIS database, same as cattle. Now, this is a difference. The people who are running farm goats versus harvested rangeland goats. A farm goat are all goats other than a harvested rangeland goat. A farm goat is any goat that has been subject to either any form of management, a breeding program, or is being held behind wire. That is what is classed as a farmed goat. They will require eID devices if born after the 1st of January 25 and everything after the 1st of January 27. Now, for the people out there with harvested rangeland goats, it is defined as a goat moving directly from a place where it is living in a wild state. It has not been born as a result of a breeding program and has not been subject to any husbandry procedures. Now, those harvested rangeland goats can move directly from their property of capture to either one depot, then to slaughter, or they can go from property of capture directly to slaughter. Now, anyone with harvested rangeland goats, watch this space. There is going to be it hasn't been announced yet, but I believe keep an eye on it. What's going to happen is you will register with the department, the DPI, Biosecurity, that you actually have harvested rangeland goats on your property. At the moment, you might have that we've got goats, sheep, and cattle. You will actually register that you have harvested rangeland goats. That will then give you the ability to get an NVD that is, I believe, is going to come, and this is a watch this space, that is a specific harvested rangeland goat NVD. So you'll have an NVD which you've got now for your farm goats, but if you are registered with the department as having harvested rangeland goats, that will allow you to get LPA accredited for having harvested rangeland goats with in Sydney, where you get, with LPA, you get your NVDs. That then will give you the ability to send untagged harvested rangeland goats to the depot or directly to slaughter. If you do not have one of those, they will be required to be tagged. That is a watch this space. The Goat Industry Council of Australia, I would assume, are going to make a lot more, put out a lot of information on this. I'm not sure of the dates, however, I would assume it will fall in line with the 1st of January 2025. That is a watch this space if you're running harvested rangeland goats. Reporting requirements. Lambs and farmed kids born after 1st January 2025 require an eID breeder device prior to moving from the pick of birth. Responsibility of the receiver, notification within 48 hours, your NVD. That is no different to cattle, and it is no different to what is happening now with the mob-based system. The only difference is the eID tag. Sale yards. If you are going to the sale yards, and quite a few said that they go to Queensland sale yards, it is a responsibility of the sale yards to do the transfer from your property to the sale yards, and then from the sale yards to the purchaser's property. It is also the sale yard's responsibility to ensure that animals leave the sale yards with a eID device in their ear, no different to cattle. Now, Auctions Plus. If you are buying out of Auctions Plus, it is not a sale yard. The responsibility for the transfer of the devices, as same as now and with the eIDs, falls on the purchaser of the property. They are a service provider that provide a platform to facilitate the auction. They are not classed as a sale yard. A lot of producers get caught, sheep or cattle, thinking that it is a sale and it is the sale yard's responsibility. That is not the case with Auctions Plus. So if you're buying or selling, be aware it is the purchaser's responsibility to do the transfer. Processor's responsibility is for uploading the eID kill information to the NLI's database for all tags, electronic tags from the 1st of January 2025 for sheep and farm goats. There will still be mob-based kill uploads required for all visual tagged sheep and farm goats up until the period of 1 January 27. Mob-based kill uploads will still be required for harvested rangeland goats. That is when they are sent to the meatworks with the harvested rangeland goat NVD. They will be a mob-based movement and they will not be required to be tagged. Right, for the small percentage that go interstate, or this is important, stock must be identified in accordance with the legal requirements of the state jurisdiction that you are going into. So if you are going into New South Wales, Victoria with sheep or goats, you have to meet their requirements to enter that state. Now, it's an industry requirement, it's market driven. You'll need to comply when consigning animals to that industry sector. It is not a legislated thing. It is not a Queensland government thing. If New South Wales require this, you must meet that to get into their state. So for the people, the cattle people probably are aware of this. For the people with sheep only, basically, or goats only, how does this work? You order the devices through your rural seller, your agent, etc. those devices are uploaded to your pick on the NLIS database. As you can see there, the cattle, it's the same concept. As the livestock, as the sheep move through the system, those devices are read and transferred from the breeder to the sale yards to the processors or to a feedlot, or it might be producer to sale yards. Each individual animal is read and transferred from pick to pick through the NLIS database. The NVD, that's nothing, you've all seen that. Once again, your harvested rangeland goat fellas, keep an eye out for more information on the harvested rangeland goat situation. Right, eID tagging for sheep and goats. All sheep and farm goats leaving the property of birth require tagging by a breeder device. In Queensland, you can use any colour. The colour is not legislated. I'll show you a list of the colours in a minute. It is encouraged, but it is not legislated in Queensland. In other states, it is legislated. You must use, particularly this year, is light blue. You must use light blue. In Queensland, it is not legislated. Sheep and farm goats not on their property of birth are tagged with a pink post-breeder tag. So if an animal is not on its property of birth when the eID tagging situation comes in, you give it a pink post-breeder tag. It's the same as the orange tag in cattle, pink post-breeder tag. You can tag in either ear. For your sheep and or farm goats, you can tag in either ear. That is not legislated. I've got down there tagging price $1.50 to $2.50, depending on the type of tag, the company obviously, and what you wish to put on that electronic device. Some people are putting extra information, phone numbers, property names, etc. That is entirely up to yourselves. Here's the year of colours. So this year's sky blue. For the people going into, as I said, you can use any one of those colours. However, I have found through the workshops, people marketing into a processor in Tamworth, I believe. It is a requirement of that processor that they are tagged with the year of birth colour. So that is a market-driven requirement. So be aware that if you are going down into the southern states, there are some requirements, industry market requirements, that it is tagged with the specific colour. And once again, pink post-breeder tag. If they're not on their property of birth, they get a pink tag. These are the devices that are accredited at the present time. Once again, you can see the tag is actually in one of especially the wraparounds. It's down one side of the tag. The one second from the bottom, it's actually in the red pin. It's actually in the pin. The top device is for your earless dairy goats, and it is a leg band to go around the legs. And then you've got the other devices that are accredited at this present time. So you can have any one of those devices. Now, I put this up for the simple fact of tag retention. Tag retention is something that will come up. I actually ran the tag trials for probably most of the visual tags that you guys are using at present. Those trials were run back in 2006 and 7, so it was a long time ago. They were run in, I was based in, I'd just come out of Charleville and Longreach at that point. So I found a trial property on a mate's place in the Mulga country, a couple of hours west of Charleville, open downs paddock. We had turkey bush country over at Streaky Bay in South Australia, had some very high intensive areas around Walker and down in Victoria, and also ran some in the Trap Rock fine wool country around Inglewood. What I did find is the shearers seemed to be very hard on tags. What I did find was the high intensive areas where they were, this is like, you know, near enough to 20 years ago, they were going back through and they were doing fleece weights, weight gains, microns for individual animals. They were very heavy on their shearers because they wanted that visual tag in the ear that was linked to the barcodes that went with the wool samples, etc. I found that there was a lot less tag loss by shearers down there because the shearers were fully aware that the producer did want the devices. Tag trials are run for a period of 3 years. They must have a minimum of 500 animals per trial. They must be run in a variety of land types, and they cannot lose more than 1.5% in the first year. And after the third year, they can't have lost more than 3.5% to become accredited. The reason you know it's accredited is on the tag itself, there's a little picture of Australia. So that is the requirement for tags to become accredited. Tag retention is something that will come up. So yes, that is a tag retention situation. They're just the workshops I've run, and basically, Beck, that's just a information that you can get on more info on sheep and goat eID. But Beck, I'm pretty done, so I'll pass over to you and see what questions we have.
Thanks for that, Doug. I think that's the fourth time I've heard your presentation, and I pick up something new most times. It's really enjoy seeing all that data presented on the maps, and that really visual demonstration of how our sheep and goats move around the country. So there are a few questions for you today, Doug. I'll start with this one. Can you please clarify, if we sell sheep to a New South Wales or Victorian processor, will they read whatever eID tag sheep we send and do a mob-based movement record for visual tagged animals?
Yep, can you hear me, Beck? Yep.
Yep.
Yes, so if you're sending down into Victoria, okay, or New South Wales have required that their processors read any electronic tags that come in from the middle of 2024. So yes, there will be a time period, as was with cattle. You will have both systems. If it's an electronic tag, it is read and deceased off the database. If it is a visual system, they do it how they're doing it now and do a mob-based kill. So there will be two parallel systems for a period of time. However, from the information I've seen, New South Wales, Victoria are already doing it. New South Wales, any eID tags will be required to be read from the middle of 2024. But for a period of time up until the beginning of 2027, yes, there will be two parallel systems.
And if the destination markets decide to go earlier and only want to buy eID tagged animals, that's up to them, not us.
Yeah, that's market driven. And if it goes the same as cattle, what you'll find is they will want the eID tags quicker, because the visual tag will become, the eID tracing is very streamlined. It runs through their computer programs. There's readers on the kill floor, very streamlined. It takes a human out. They read them. It automatically goes up and it goes. The mob-based system is very different. Has to be manually typed in. And that's exactly right. If the processors say we want them all electronically tagged from the middle of 24, if you want to sell to that market, you have to tag them. But what they will find is the electronic system is a lot more streamlined once they get the teething issues out, and simply because we don't have a lot of sheep processors in Queensland that do any reasonable numbers, and our sheep processors in Queensland do cattle anyway. They will find that it is much easier to do the electronic versus the mob-based movements.
Righto. Next question. We've got a few questions coming in, so I'll just remind people to drop your questions into the question box, and we will sit here and chip away at them. Doug, will this data show on our MSA reports if animals leave the properties as weaners? So not when they're going direct to works. In
the MSA report?
I think the question they might mean their carcass data. Will the tag be linked to carcass data?
The tag will be linked to carcass data. I'm assuming, and I can't remember what I've seen in Victoria, but I'm assuming the carcass data will come back in an individual number. It will come back as the individual animal, and there's the carcass data on that individual animal, which then you can go back to your management. Now, what happens with, and I'll go with cattle here, once you sell those animals, you do not get that carcass data. However, if you go to a feedlot type situation, or you know the person who is killing that animal, you can get the information that way. There are things with MLA, livestock data link, which I believe is looking at linking the carcass data through. However, once the animal is sold, the only way you can actually get that killed data is by knowing where it went to, and as that person is the owner of the data, you'd have to go to them to get it back.
Okay, and specifically for goats, are you aware of any of the goat processors going to start giving individual kill data for individual animals like they do with cattle?
Yeah, good question. With goats, I spoke to Campbell the other day, didn't even think of it. Yeah, so no, I'm not aware of it. However, I cannot see why they wouldn't do it. The software is there. The software is available just to give individual carcass data on individual animals. And if it doesn't start, I would be very surprised if it does not come in. If it does not start straight up, I'll be very surprised if it does not come in, because these devices allow you to, from a management perspective, allow you to manage individual animals. So I'll be very surprised if it does not come in, and there'd be no reason why it can't come in apart from the processor not wanting to give it out.
Yep, thanks. A quick question, is Queensland likely to introduce compulsory colour coding?
No. It's been discussed. It's been discussed. It has not been supported. We didn't do it when the visual tags came in. It is entirely voluntary. From the workshops I've run, and I've spoken to 120 producers in 9 different centres or something within Queensland over the last month, 6 weeks, most of them seem to be doing it anyway, Beck, but no, it's not going to be made compulsory. Markets will drive that.
Thanks. With regards to online auctions, why are agents not responsible for the nils transfers if they're involved?
Doesn't matter who's responsible, the receiver has to do it. A lot of the times the agents should be involved in it, because they are the ones assessing, they are the ones facilitating it to an extent and doing it. Going on the workshops I've done, the agents do a large percentage of the NLIS cattle and sheep work in central and southwestern Queensland, and the agents, if they are not receiving it, that'll be a deal between yourself and your agent, whether he does the reading or you do the reading. It's a commercial decision. Bottom line is that Auctions Plus provide a platform. They're not a sale yard, therefore it's up to the receiver to do the transfer. Or if you are selling Auctions Plus, there's nothing stopping you doing the read. However, whether an agent's involved in doing the read is a commercial decision between yourself and your agent.
Yep. Okay, so if I've already got animals that have a standard non-electronic nils tag in their ear, do I have to change them over to electronic tags by your 2027 date?
Yep. From 1st January 2027, even if it's got a visual tag in it, the 2025, 2027 are the national timeframes. That is what is nationally being looked at. So at this point, yes, from 2027, they will require a electronic device. So you would add electronic device, and from 2027, everyone will only be looking at the electronic device, be it the sale yards or the processor. They'll only be looking for that electronic device. They'll have systems in place that will automatically read that electronic device. So yes, at that point, if they do not have one, they will require a eID device.
And there's one question in the in the questions when people registered about show stock, but it applies to all animals really. If they do have a visual nils tag in their ear, are they permitted to remove that tag and replace it with a new one?
If you're the owner, if the animal is still on its property of birth, yes, you are. If it is not on its property of birth, I would leave the visual tag in. Personally,
and add an electronic one beside it.
Yeah, but or you can tag it. You can do it in either ear, or you can remove it and put an electronic in. Obviously, pink for post breeder, and then you've got your breeder colours.
Okay. Just a second question following on to the consignment going to a New South Wales processor. Are they able to have a mixed lot of eID tags and visual tags in the same mob? Meaning, can we have them mixed with that mob while they're in a transition phase?
Yeah, once again, I would check with your processor, but I don't see why not. If the livestock are one consignment coming off the one pick number, there's no reason why you wouldn't. Obviously, if you've got visual and non-visual, you might be having lambs and I don't know, another class of animal there, lambs or kids. But basically, there's no reason why not. But once again, I'd just say to my processor, listen, I'm sending down a mixed line here. Do you want them drafted up prior or not? Because obviously there'll be two different classes of livestock, but there's no reason why you can't.
And if that was a requirement of your destination works, you could send them on two separate NVDs and just have one lot eID and one visual.
Yes, you can. And I ran a workshop in Charleville, and I spoke to the vet there, and they do not like boxed lines of farmed and harvested rangeland goats. They're two completely different articles, so that would require two separate NVDs coming in at the present time.
Yes. Just looking at some other questions. Why are harvested rangeland goats exempt, but terminal property bred animals not exempt from? Why isn't there an exemption for animals that are terminal bred going direct to works?
Yeah, and harvested rangeland goats, actually that's the second person that's ever wanted their harvested rangeland goats tagged. Basically, harvested rangeland goats, when you are dealing with a non-managed animal, there's a lot of considerations: workplace health and safety, obviously, animal welfare, obviously. So that is why at this particular point, harvested rangeland goats are not identified. However, GEICA is well aware that they are one of the few animals in the food chain that are not identified, that hence the bringing in of the new NVD to try and tighten up the traceability for the harvested rangeland goats and who is selling them, because you have to be registered to do it. The livestock direct from property of birth to slaughter, that's a very good question. And basically they've lived on your place the whole time and they go 100k down the road and get slaughtered. It's more about the cohort animals that have been in contact with that particular animal. However, yeah, it's a very good question, Beck, because really they're coming off their property of birth going to slaughter. So it's more about the cohorts and the animals they have been in contact with, but also the fact that we had to start somewhere, and that's where it's ended up. But a very good question, that one.
Yeah, it's and thank you. I think we've pretty pretty much gone through all of the questions at the moment. Was there any, have you got any takeaways, Doug, now reflecting back on the 9 in-person information sessions you've done and this one that you want to leave people with today?
Yeah, so bottom line, anything born after 1st January 2025 requires a breeder device. Everything after the beginning of 2027, 1st January 2027, requires a device. Watch this space on the funding or incentive scheme, and if you're a harvested rangeland goat, watch that space regarding the changes that will be coming there, because if you send them in on the wrong NVD, they will be required to be tagged or rejected, I believe. So that is a watch this space, that one there. And yeah, the main thing is people from the last lot of workshops are just working out when they start tagging, remembering the animal only has to be tagged prior to leaving. So it might stay there for 5 or 6 years before it gets a tag, or some people might tag at landmarking and use it for management. Others may not tag at all until they're going on the truck. That is entirely up to yourselves and the type of business that you run, and that's your farm, your sheep, and your farmed goats. So no, that'd be the main thing, Beck.
Okay. Righto. So I'm just going to, we're almost out of time for today. So I just want to remind everybody that when the webinar finishes today, they'll receive an email with a link to the feedback form, and also the link is now available in the chat box if you would like to complete it straight away. This sort of feedback is really valuable for us, and we've actually been using the feedback from all of these information sessions and feeding that into our colleagues down in the big city, and helping to get your opinions and questions and all of the themes that have been coming out of these information sessions down into Brisbane and where they need to be heard. So that's an opportunity for you to put any comments or questions in there, and we also really value your time because it helps us do our job better. Otherwise, thank you so much to Doug for providing us all with some really useful information, and until we all connect again, all the best, and thank you very much for joining us.